Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next guest is quite possibly the only bi- or multilingual comedian there is. It's not just that he speaks multiple languages, it's that he does so in his act, telling jokes in fluent English, French, Punjabi, Hindi, and I think I've heard some Spanish as well. He's currently about to embark on a North American tour, but before he does that, Sugar Sammy is here, and before he comes out, let's take a quick look at his work.
You're Iraqi also? You're the happiest Iraqi I've ever seen in my life. That dude, this guy is like so happy. I love this guy. Man. Okay, relax. This woman's taking everything so seriously. He's in America. Oh, Canadian guy. Do you feel free now that this woman just proclaimed your freedom? How long have you been single?
All my life.
All your life? Okay. He's like, well, we're gonna hook him up then. One lady was like, "Aww, I'll suck his dick." You're in America now.
Put your hands together for Sugar Sammy. Let's hear it. Hey.
I'm here.
You're here. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's go back to the beginning with you. I have so many questions. You are a completely different kind of stand-up comedian. I think not just because of all of the languages that you speak on stage, which is it's wild that you do that. That you found a way to tell jokes for all different languages of people that all different languages would kind of understand at the same time. But let's talk about how you got into comedy, how this all started.
Well, I always wanted to be a stand-up. I mean, when I was a kid, I remember watching Eddie Murphy, Delirious. I think every comedian of my generation, like that was the special that we all watched. And I remember watching that and as a kid going, I want to do that job. That job looks like fun, you know? And late night, you'd see Carson on, and you'd be like, you know, those are my early memories of it. So I always was pursuing, you know, being a stand-up comedian. And then, you know, in the meantime, I'd do other things, you know, while I was pursuing that. So, but I did start doing it professionally very early at the age of 19.
What was your first time like?
My first time on stage was pretty wild. I was in college, and I was part of the Black Student Association. But I was at this school, and I was part of the Black Student Association because, you know, I had a lot of friends in the association, and they were like, hey, you know, I was like, can I be part of it? And they're like, yeah, come on. And then we needed to raise funds for the association, and we wanted to do a stand-up comedy show. We wanted to throw a show, but we couldn't afford comedians. So everybody knew I was the class clown, and I wanted to do stand-up, so I was like, well, I'll do it. And we put together a show, and it was my first time doing a show ever. We raised like $1,200 that day. We sold tickets for like $3.
You immediately saw that this could be a lucrative business.
This could be a lucrative business, yeah, for sure. And then we packed it up. I made the front page of the college paper, but for all the wrong reasons.
What were the wrong reasons?
I offended everybody. I think I offended everybody, including because it was like this Christian college. So imagine this Indian kid in a Christian college who's part of the Black Student Association. You want to talk about diversity? That right there, I think I ticked off every box I could just to...
But right away, you're sort of doing what you do now, which is crossing all of these borders that are unexpected in comedy, because as we were saying in the green room, so often people say comedy doesn't travel across borders because every culture has their own things that they think are funny.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's always learning about a new culture. That's the interesting part. Is for me, it's not only translating to a new culture, to a new audience, but learning. So you have to have that appetite to learn about someone new. I know it's not very American, but like you have to have that appetite to want to be like, hey, I want to travel somewhere. I want to learn about this culture. I want to learn about this country, and I want to write material for them, you know? So a lot of times, like now I'm in France. I've been touring France for a long time, and I walked into France 2 years ago and really did my homework. It's very anthropological to really like sit down, observe, ask questions, and build a show around France. It is a cultural roast of the whole country, but at the same time, I did my research, and it takes more research when you're going to roast a country as well.
But also, that cultural roast, I would imagine, comes from a place of empathy and comes from a place of love.
Yeah. And
Or not.
interest. Yeah, no, and you have to be interested. You know, you really
The
have
audience
to-
would be able to tell if you were just standing on stage and shitting on them, and it was coming from a completely malicious place.
Yeah, exactly.
They would not put up with it.
Yeah, it wouldn't last too long. Yeah, it wouldn't last too long. So it has to come from that place, and it also has to be, you have to genuinely be interested in a culture. So, you know, right now I was touring Canada. I was doing it in English, and I was doing it in French. And my French show in Canada is completely different from my French show in France, because it's not only a linguistic adaptation, it's a cultural one. You know, my show in the States is a very different show. I call it my American show. So it's really comparing, you know, what goes on in the rest of the world and America, especially Canadians, you know, being your neighbors. Like, we're so different. You know, we're your neighbors. We're right there. But it's such a different nation, especially right now.
Yeah.
You know, especially these days in the last couple of years. I mean, more than ever.
Well, Canada's just sitting up there looking at us going, oh my God, guy, whoa.
I
You need to relax down there.
Yeah, exactly. We canceled Netflix in Canada. We just watch you guys.
I think we canceled Netflix too. We're just watching each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my, what, are you gonna burn that down now? Oh my God. What if you had to describe, you know, the French or French Canadians and the Americans in one word? How would you describe
Well,
them?
that'd be generalizing, right? So you have to
course.
really go into the specifics. You can't do that. That's
Well,
the
you can
thing.
go into the specifics if you'd like.
Well, the specifics are. I mean, it's you know, it takes a while. You'd have to. This is just like a half-hour show. It would take like an hour. You'd have to come to the show. But I do that like in my next tour, my next American tour. You'll see me comparing all three. You know, comparing the French versus the Americans versus the Canadians, and I think it's a very interesting comparison as well.
But I guess I mean that in terms of the audience itself, like the audience and how you have to perform for them.
Right.
What is it? Do you see a major difference there in
Oh,
terms
for
of?
sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I think the French, are very reserved. So they'll be like, they don't want to participate. So, you know, I'll do some crowd work, and they won't want to answer. If I throw out a question to the audience, it's very rare that they'll answer. In America, everybody wants to participate. You know, they have to say something, which is great. In Canada, we're kind of in between, you know?
That's right. I mean, but that also explains a lot culturally.
Yeah, it does.
as well.
I think with Canadian comedians, I think one of the reasons they travel so well is I think in Canada we grew up wanting to connect with different people. I mean, we grew up, you know, like they say here, it's a melting pot of people. In Canada, you know, we define it more as a mosaic. You know, like I think it's one of those things where you know, people are encouraged to be themselves without having to be like Canadian. You know, like there's
People
not
are
a Canadian
encouraged to
definition.
travel as well.
To travel as well. I think Canadians travel a lot more.
Than Americans.
They do, but I think also there's a reason for that. Like in America, you guys have so many big cities. It takes a while to visit your whole country and take it in as well, you know? I mean, which is cool. Like I've been visiting so many big cities here. I've never seen that in any other country. So many massive cities, you know, urban centers like that.
I think there's also the economic component of Canada as well. People go to university in Canada. They don't come out in a mountain of debt. They
Yeah.
can kind of come out and do a little traveling and then get to work. Lots of Americans come out of college and are like, I gotta make money.
Yeah, I know. I know like some of them are feeling that right now.
They're like, what am I doing here? I gotta go make money.
Yeah, I have this joke where I talk about how, you know, you guys have the American dream. We have the Canadian dream. It's like the American dream, but with healthcare.
Yeah.
You know, like it's so it's like we basically, we have a lot of that. You know, I mean, I went to university in Montreal, and you know, it costs you guys to go to college every year. What, 60 grand? Was it about 60 grand?
If you're going to NYU or one of the big universities, yeah.
Like our you know, Ivy League schools, universities, like $3 grand a year.
Yeah.
You know, for our citizens. So it's like it's a massive difference. So you walk out going, okay, I could clear this, you know, in half a season. You know, like once I start my working. Whereas you guys have to, it takes a few years. So there's that deterrent of what's going to happen. How am I going to get health insurance? So yeah, of course, you know, and like, you know, I talk about so many other differences. You look at it, you know, in Canada, you know, guns are illegal, weed is legal. Here, weed is illegal, guns are legal. So it makes for very different temperaments. You know, like even though we're neighbors, it's like, you know, that.
Well, weed is recently legal, right?
Very recently,
Very
yeah.
recently legal. And guns aren't entirely illegal, right?
They're not entirely illegal, but it's very difficult to get one. Like you can't just walk, you know, go to the Walmart drive-through and be like, oh, can I have like some scotch tape, a couple of bags, a hammer, and yeah, throw in a gun,
My automatic AR-15 rifle, please. Thank you.
Can I have a 22 caliber with that? No, like you can't just right. Like here, it's a way easier. It's way easier. So
Now, you said that your first show, you were at this Catholic university, you were in the Black Student Union, and plus you're an Indian man, and so you're crossing all these lines. And I imagine you started with crowd work then, and crowd work has become a huge component of your show, right? How did that begin? How did you realize that crowd work was such a massive part of your performance?
I mean, I started out in comedy clubs like most comedians. You start out, you host, and then you feature, and then you headline. So when I was hosting, it was one of those things where you had to do crowd work. It was part of your it had to be part of your DNA. So I kind of started doing it that way. And when I headlined, it was such a part of what I was doing in Canada already, hosting, because hosting is a very prestigious. It's a very prestigious, function in Canada and in the UK. Whereas in the States, you're very low down the totem pole if you're hosting. It's like the headliner, then there's the feature act, then there's a host. Whereas in the UK and Canada, the host is pretty much second in command after the headliner, and so it's a very valued thing. So a lot of headliners on their off time when they're just working on other material, they'll host because it'll be a good way to test new material out as well and hone your skills in terms of crowd work. So I was doing that anyway, and then it became a big part of my show because I also love the interaction with the audience. I like making every show unique. I like acknowledging that they're there, and if something happens, I like going with it. I'm pretty much that guy who loves the improv part of the experience as well. And I think today people like being part of the experience as well. It's very interactive, and people, with social media, with Instagram, with YouTube, with all of that, people like being the star of the show as well. So I think for me, I recognize that very early on, and I think a lot of times audience members build the show with me.
I think also people really like authenticity in the sense that something is close to going off the rails.
Yeah.
And when you're doing crowd work and you're improvising, there is this constant feeling that an audience may not even know that they have, that this could end badly.
Yeah.
That this could either generate a laugh because he wants it to, or generate a laugh because someone throws something at him.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much most of my show. You never know where it's going to go.
Have you ever had anything thrown at you?
I've had never like objects, but
Bibles by the Catholics
yeah,
on your first show?
exactly. But I have had like moments where people didn't know how I was going to get out of it, but your experience kicks in, and that mechanism where you want to make sure that you save the room. That definitely gets kicked in. That has happened to me once or twice, where there have been tense moments and I had to think on my feet. But that's good. 22 years of experience on stage will do that to you.
I'd imagine that's also, in some ways, as much as you don't want that to happen every show, it's sort of what you live for.
Yeah.
When it does.
It's exciting because for me, I know my material.
Yeah.
Like I'll have my material ready, but it's finding that new thing every show. That's what. That new moment that's never going to happen again. That's what I love, and that's why I tape every show, and we put all the best improv moments online, and that's pretty much what a lot of people get to see. So when they come to the show, they've never heard any of the material, but they've seen all these great crowd moments, like the one we saw earlier there in Houston.
Do you find that being multilingual, speaking all these languages, doing some of your set in a number of these languages gives you a certain amount of leeway when it comes to talking about other cultures? Like it allows you to say certain things that maybe like, say me getting up on stage who doesn't speak these other languages, if I kneeled down and was like, you look like the happiest Iraqi I've ever seen. Like people might be like, whoa, dude.
Well, it depends how you say it. If you say it like that, it's not going to go well.
Whoa, white privilege guy, back down a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, if it comes from I think a place of for me,
I would not say it that way. For the purpose of this conversation,
it'd have to be a way lighter way to say it. It has to be less Republican, a little more
yelling it aggressively in his face.
Yeah. So for me, it's always been growing up in a multicultural environment. I grew up in one of the most multicultural neighborhoods in Canada. Went to the most multicultural high school in Canada, and just having all these cultures with me and growing up in my developmental years, it makes it so that when I do comedy, and when I do make fun of someone or something, it has to be so precise so it doesn't become a caricature. It has to be so precise, because when you do your homework and it's precise, then people like it because they feel like he actually did his work. You know, and I did that when I did that in France, and I make fun of the French. They understand, like, okay, he actually knows us really well. It's one of the biggest compliments I like getting is when someone comes up to me after the show and goes, "I laughed, I really loved it, but how do you know us so well?" I love that. I think for me, it's a sign that you've done your homework as a comedian. And I think you need to be precise, because if you don't, then it definitely falls into caricature. And that was one of the problems with the whole Apu debate, right? It was such a caricature that obviously some people took it to be offensive. Whereas, like, you look at someone like Peter Sellers when he did The Party in 1969. I watched that movie, you know, and I was watching it going, I was hesitant to watch because I thought, man, I'm going to be offended. It's a white guy playing an Indian guy. But he was so spot on. It reminded me, I thought I was watching one of my uncles.
It's
like with the
also
mannerisms.
so surreal and outlandish that I feel like you could even be like, he's not even really playing an Indian guy. He's just playing something crazy right now.
You forget that it's a white guy. Yeah. That's how good he was. So it's like, to me, that lends itself to, like, if you do your homework, if it's a tribute to a certain culture, then it works. But if it's a caricature, that's when people get offended. So that's the thing, you gotta do your homework even more. And in today's sensitive environment, I feel like for us as comedians, it's a big challenge because you've gotta be an even better writer.
Well, it's so interesting. Oftentimes I hear comedians say people are too sensitive, audiences are too sensitive. And I don't necessarily see that. I see audiences are sensitive to bad jokes.
Exactly.
Audiences are sensitive to generalizing and stereotypes, but comedy has always been good when it's detailed.
Yeah.
The best comedy is detailed.
I think today's audience is probably savvier, and they're more demanding.
They grew up with stand-up. They
Yeah.
grew up with The Simpsons. They grew up with some of the best comedy writing there's ever been.
Yeah, so they're more demanding. They want you to be better than that, you know? And that I like because it's a challenge. As a writer, you're like, okay, I've got to be so good at this, especially if it's racy, especially if someone could be offended. I'd like them to think that they will be, but that they won't. They come out laughing. And that's what I liked about Peter Sellers. You know, that's why I feel like that's a really good example. You've just got to do your homework a little bit more, and you got to be more detailed, and you've got to care more about the person that you're making fun of.
I'm so glad you brought The Party up. I love that movie.
I love that movie too.
It's so great. It's so weird and crazy and slapstick and
I
great.
know.
Yeah.
I just hope they don't remake it. You know, I hate when they take a classic and they remake it, and then it's like, why did you even touch that?
Well, wouldn't it be so weird too if they remade it with? I mean, this is a strange thing to say, but what if they remade The Party with an Indian actor?
Yeah, but I feel like they shouldn't even touch that. Do something else.
But that's what I mean. That would be kind of weird because sort of what's interesting about watching The Party now, 40 years, 50 years later, is that it is Peter Sellers doing this thing. And to sort of make it comfortable would almost take away some of what's so thrilling about watching him do that performance.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
If they did it, you'd be like, okay, this is just a weird comedy.
Yeah. And it's like, but you also, because you know the original, you'd already go in thinking this is not going to be as good. You know, how many movies have we seen where we hated the remake? You know, recently. You know,
I think I saw one last week.
Yeah, they do it all the time. Like they've done it with Footloose,
Yeah.
they've done it with Dirty Dancing, they've done it with and you forget about them so quickly too. They did it with Total Recall. It's like, leave those classics alone. They did it with Chips. They
RoboCop as well.
did RoboCop. They did it with, say which one? Lion King. They remade Lion King?
They're doing it right now.
Man, people got to stop. Can you guys start a petition? Yeah, just come up with new scripts. Like, stop remaking these things that you shouldn't be touching anymore. Yeah.
When did you learn in your stand-up that the devil was in the details? That these things were going to be funnier, or these observations were going to be funnier if you did your homework and that it was detailed? Did you ever find yourself in a position where you were wondering, why didn't this joke work? Or why did these people get mad at me? Maybe I need to restructure this.
Absolutely. And, like, comedy is all trial and error. You know, especially stand-up when you're writing in your early years. You know, the stuff that I wrote years ago, I'll watch specials that I've done, 10, 15 years ago and go, oh my God, I can't believe I put that out. That should not be anywhere anymore.
I think all stand-ups are like that. Every
Yeah.
stand-up I've talked to has been like, 10 years ago I thought I'm the best I'm ever going to be. And then 5 years later I saw that footage and I was like, God, I was terrible.
Yeah.
I'm the best I'll ever be now. And it keeps happening every 5 years.
And that's a great sign because that shows that you're progressing. It shows that you're getting better. You know, and the more that gap becomes shorter, the faster you're growing as a writer. Now it's starting to happen to me every 3-4 years where I'll look back at something I did 3 years ago and go, man, I'm better than this. This joke needs to go out. This joke was too easy. I got to get rid of this. So that's a good sign, and it has to keep happening. And I think the more you do that, the more respect you have for yourself as a comedian, the more respect you have for your audience and the people that you're making fun of and the people that you're talking about. Yeah.
So you were touring France for a while, right? Were you living in France for a couple of years?
Yeah. I was based there.
So what made you base yourself in France? How did that happen?
I think the immersion. I think nothing beats. Nothing's going to educate you like immersion. Immersion, being immersed. And being surrounded by your subjects. I think there's nothing that's going to be better.
Did you go there with the experiment in mind? Like, I'm going to
Yeah.
go to France and I'm going to start writing comedy about living in France.
Yeah, I said I have to do that. And now that I'm in the States, the more I'm touring the U.S. right now, the more like just material is jumping out at me because I see the differences right away. And you've got to take them. Stuff that you guys take for granted, like it's become like wallpaper. Someone who just walks into America will notice them right away and start just noting them down, and that's refreshing to you as a comedian, as a writer. Those are the things that jump out. You got to note them right away, and you got to start working on them because that experience of noticing something for the first time won't happen again.
What's amazing about America is that I find when I travel the country is that America is vast, and geographically it's very different. And you can have the observations in one place, you go to another place. They do not exist at all. It changes all across the country.
Demographically, you guys are so different everywhere. I mean, just also culturally, from state to state, something can vary. I remember driving down Missouri at one point, and I saw a sign that said, and I never saw that before, guns, beer, and ammo. I was like, what? And they take this exit. I'm like, all right. And let's go see what's happening. And a fellow comedian brought me into a store and was like, look at and there were guns everywhere. He's like, look at this. You want to hold one? I'm like, no, man. I watch Law and Order. My prints are going to be on this. They're going to frame me for something. Look at some of the guys. Like,
I was in Maine and I
That's what
saw
they do.
a diner in Maine that had a sign on the door that said, "This is not a gun-free zone."
all right.
And I thought, why would I eat in here?
Yeah.
What? I'm not gonna, you want to eat with all you people holding guns? It's so weird.
Is there a place we could go where? Actually,
Selling point?
yeah. I actually was headlining in a comedy club. I was in Chicago. I was headlining, and outside the comedy club, there was a sign with like a picture of a gun with like no guns allowed. And I was like, wow. Like, in Canada, we don't see that because you don't really have access to guns that much.
Don't assume you'll just have a gun.
No, but I guess here everyone's packing. Yeah.
You're not packing right now?
I'm not packing right
Oh,
now.
you're in. Oh, okay. I'll give you my gun backstage.
Yeah, we'll trade. We'll show each other.
I think we have one question in the audience, right? Who has a question? Right here.
Hello.
Hi.
there. So clearly you've been almost like everywhere around the world. Is there a specific place that has been deemed like your favorite to visit and perform? And if so, why?
Someone doing construction?
The heater.
I actually love performing everywhere. That's the thing for me. Everything becomes interesting. I was performing in France when I first went there. I was so excited, and I still am. But landing in the States and having an American audience, there was nothing more exciting for me in the last couple of weeks because I hadn't performed to an American audience in a couple of years. So for me, it's always that newness of going to find a new audience and winning them over, and saying, okay, how do I build a bridge between what I know, who I am, and they are? It's all about, building bridges, not walls.
100%. How was that first show?
Like, this dude, man. Sorry?
How was that first show?
It was great. I think the first show was great. It was fun. I think American audiences appreciated that whole perspective of, the Canadian taking the piss out of them. I
think we love it now.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think like 10 years ago, we would have like maybe raised an eyebrow at it, and now we're all just kind of like, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think
we really let this whole thing atrophy over here.
Yeah, and I think it's fun. My audiences who show up in France is very interesting because you'll get Americans, you'll get the French who know me from France because they're expats or because their family members sent them, and you'll have the Canadians and you'll have the Quebecois and the Indians, and then just a mix of everyone. So it's like all these demographics hanging out. Like this is how I grew up, just having such a great mosaic of people out there, and then being able to laugh together and being able to not just laugh at each other, but laugh together and you know, have our differences bond us, you know.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, it must be amazing when you look out into the audience and see that it's a melting pot, if you will.
Oh, it's fun, and I think it makes it fun for the audience too. It's a great experience to be able to, because through laughter we're also learning new things culturally. You know, like when I roast the French, like a lot of Americans are like, "Oh, I didn't know that about France." You know, I didn't know that this and this and this happened there. So, and the French are like, "Oh, we didn't see." The fact that, you know, French Canadians were different than us in this way. So, you know, it's a great way to, I think, be able to see something different. I think that's for me what's fun too as a comedian, is to travel and learn something new, you know, and find out something new about a different culture. You know, life's too short. You want to try to figure out how everybody is and how everybody lives on this planet, you know, as much as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Your U.S. tour is happening right now, right? You're going to be in San Jose, you're going to be in New York, Toronto, Atlanta, and then you're going to be hitting some cities in Europe in a little bit,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I also have D.C., Seattle, yeah, and then all of this in Europe, if you guys care about Europe.
And people can check you out. They can go on your Twitter. They can check out your website, right, to find out all these tours or all these dates as well.
Yeah, go sugarsammy.com.
Amazing. Sugar Sammy, everybody. Let's
Thank
hear
you
it.
very much.